I hope you're enjoying yourselves. You're doing a great job, and tomorrow's going to be a wonderful day. But to make sure it's a wonderful day, I want to introduce two people who I am proud and flattered to call my friends. Marjorie Strayer Prindle. I always forget to put on her last name. She's semi-recently married. Runs Capital Impact, which is a lobbying firm. She's based here in Old Town, or here in Alexandria. And I met her. She was chief of staff for a congressman from Washington State, Randy Tate. She was also Congresswoman Heather Wilson from New Mexico's chief of staff as well. She and I worked together for a company called the Russ Reed Company, where we did mainly appropriations for nonprofits until they were outlawed. Earmarks were outlawed.
But now they're back.
But anyway, and she's a very successful lobbyist and a very, like I said, very close friend. Michael Steele, I don't think needs an introduction, but I will anyway.
No. Brother needs an introduction.
Former RNC chairman, as you know, former lieutenant governor of the state of Maryland, first African American ever elected to state office in Maryland. Toyed with the idea of running for governor last time. Couldn't get him over the top. Yeah. But he now runs the Steele Group, which is a consulting firm downtown. So with that, let's give him a big hand, and then we'll start the festivities. Alrighty, guys. Let's start with you, Marjorie.
Okay.
Establishing credibility is very important as you go into lobby on a specific issue. Besides your Hill experience, how do you establish that credibility?
So I think there are three elements. Well, there's a lot, but I've narrowed it down to three. Authenticity, persistence, and community support. Authenticity, if you have a passion and a belief in what you're doing, the authenticity shines through. I've been very fortunate that I've been able to turn down clients that I don't feel passionate about and that I don't want to work for. Not that they're bad, I just am not on board with them. So I've been very fortunate in my career to be able to do that. Same with Congress. I couldn't be a chief of staff for a member of Congress that I didn't fully believe in, so I was very fortunate in that sense. Obviously be honest, that's part of the authenticity, no embellishments. If you don't know the answer to something, it's fine to say you don't know. Heather Wilson used to always ask the question, who is opposed to this? Used to ask lobbyists, who is opposed to this? So it's important to be honest and know who your opponents are and not bash them, but just lay out why they're wrong and you're right. DC, Capitol Hill is a very small community, so you do build a reputation, whether that's based on your client or your organization or yourself or all three of them. So beginning with authenticity. Persistence is another key component. I often relate lobbying to dating. You don't get married on the first date, so don't expect a member of Congress to say yes when you first come to them with their idea. It takes persistence, and sometimes it takes compromise. Again, dating and marriage. So, be aware of that. There is an organization called the Wine and Spirit Wholesalers, and they wanted to change a very arcane tax provision that came about during the Prohibition, which benefited importers of spirits, but punished the people that produced spirits here.
Domestic. Yeah.
Thank you, domestic. I couldn't remember that word. It took them 20 years to get their very arcane, very small provision through Congress. They found a champion. He died 2 days later. That doesn't work. So they ended up having to compromise on how they were going to change the provision. It was initially a tax at the collection point, and they compromised it to be a tax credit. And they continued for 20 years. And the head of that organization, Juanita Dugan, says that they educated so many different members of Congress and staff members and constituents of those staff, of those members of Congress, that it became inevitable that it was going to pass after 20 years. Now, hopefully it won't take you 20 years, but it's not going to happen on the first date. So that provision passed after 20 years. And then community support, I think, is key. As the Constitution says, and as this group emphasizes, it's government of the people. So it's important to show a member of Congress and or their staff person that whatever you're lobbying on has support from the community. You all being here today and on Capitol Hill tomorrow is showing them that, is showing that there's community support. Other ways to show community support is having, community leaders, famous people, I won't mention any that might be in the audience, that lend support to an issue. And those are my 3 provisions.
So Marjorie makes a very key point on education. Essentially, your role tomorrow is you're going to be educating a 25-year-old Hill staffer, essentially. You may be actually educating the member of Congress as well. But as I keep saying, I'm going to emphasize, staff does all the work. As a former staffer, I'm telling you, staff does all the work. So make sure you treat the staffers with love and respect, and they'll appreciate that very much, by the way. So Marjorie's the lobbyist, Michael's the lobbied. So when somebody comes in to see you, Michael, how do you judge whether he's full of it or not?
The minute they walk through the door, and then whatever issue they're there for. Typically, when you are going into a space where there's a little bit more of an unknown. First, let me just back up and say it's great to be with everyone, and to be here with Jim, my old buddy, and Marjorie. It's so good to see you and to be in this conversation with you. And to thank all of you first and foremost, for doing what you're doing. It's important. The country needs the conversation, but more importantly, they need the resolution to our electoral system that you're advocating for. So there's that. So you have the situation when you're walking into a space, when a Marjorie shows up to my office, there's already some level of vetting before she arrives. The political director, the communications director, the chief of staff, issue specific. So, if it's in the electoral space, voting space, if it's in on the economy, whatever it is, the relevant players in the office will have done some sort of due diligence on her, on the group that is coming in, to speak to the staff or to speak to the member directly. And so what that says, as much as they're doing homework on you and your issue, you should do homework on them and their ability to help you on your issue. Not all members are created the same. There are always the sleepers, the backbenchers who actually can be influential and important at times in a conversation.
Ask Kevin McCarthy.
Right, exactly. Ask Kevin McCarthy. And so for me, I know when I would sit down and meet with people or individuals who had specific interests that they wanted to get in front of my office or in front of our administration, I would ask them one simple question: who do you know? And at the core of this question is, what are your relationships that you have? Because that informs me of just how much influence and power you have by who you know and who's working with you, who's already on board with your interest, who's advocating on your behalf already within. If you're talking to an executive, a mayor, a governor, lieutenant governor, et cetera, they want to know, okay, what's the sphere of influence that you have with legislators, with other lobbyists, with other interests. If you're talking to a legislator, they want to know primarily who is the sphere of influence you have with other legislators, right? And then they'll worry about whether or not you got to parlay with the governor or the president or the chief executive, whatever. So it's understanding what the landscape looks like for you around your issue, who the players are, and who are the targets that you are going to be interfacing with, whether it's tomorrow or sometime down the road. The level of preparation for that is important. Because when you walk in the room, you want to be able to sit down, and the key thing is not waste time, because they give you very, very little time to begin with. So pleasantries are about a nanosecond, and then you get to the heart of why you're there. I need you to pay attention to this issue because it has a direct impact on your constituents. Now, that's a harder sell on some issues, but in the space you're in, it's a very easy sell, because it goes fundamentally to the core of what our country's about and the value of the proposition of we the people, being the government and being the ones who ultimately decide what kind of government we have. So you walk in the room already in the work that you're doing with a level of cachet. How you use that matters. The guidance you get from individuals like Jim and others who are kind of prepping and sort of moving with you through this process is invaluable, very helpful. What Marjorie just said, those three items are extremely important to understand and contextualize in your conversations. So there's a lot more work to it than you may think. You're not just showing up, right? Because when you do, you're not prepared, you will fall flat, and you may not get another meeting. And then worse yet, word ripples down the hall and around the corner. Don't waste your time with this group. Don't waste your time with this effort. And you don't want to position your issue that way.
Correct. That's great advice, as always, from both of you. I'm going to ask you both the same question here. Sorry to take the negative angle on it, but what experience has been the least effective in either being lobbied or lobbying or knowing a story of a fellow lobbyist, of what has not worked?
Are you going to go first?
Oh, the poison there is so easy and a lot to pick from. I think what has not worked is, I think a lot of times what has not worked is making assumptions about an effort and not appreciating the point that Marjorie made about how long something takes. Now, I'm a mind, because I come out of the executive branch of government as a former lieutenant governor, as opposed to the legislative side. Executives tend to be less patient with issues. So we're like, what do you mean you can't get this done like by 5 o'clock? Whereas the legislator is like, okay, I got to go talk to my colleagues. I got to go make sure I got enough people in the room who are going to agree with this. I got to run this by my leadership. I got to make sure this group over here is not pissed at me, while this group over here I really don't care. So there's all of that, and so the difficulty, I think, a lot of times is when you are approaching that space as someone who's trying to get something done, you tend to have much more of an executive mindset. It's like, okay, here's the issue, what's your problem? Right? And the reality of it is there are a lot of problems, some seen and many more unforeseen. And so taking a step back, I think, is one of the hardest things to do. To give you a good example, I've been involved in the national popular vote effort for about 6 years or so. The first time I was approached actually more than that now that I think about it, because the first time I was approached about the national popular vote effort was when I was national chairman. And an RNC member who was very involved in this effort came and said, hey, I think this is something the Republican Party should get behind and explore. And he brought it to my attention, and I was like, get the hell out of here. And the point being, I presumed some things about it without really fully understanding it, so rejected it out of hand. So you have to deal with that side of it as well, that the person or group you may be approaching is not necessarily upfront receptive to it. Now, what that was a little bit more of the failure of preparation on my friend's part to bring it to me, to sort of drop it in the middle of an effort to try to win elections in 2010. I'm like, dude, I don't have time for that, right? So time, place, circumstances matter regarding your issue, because there are other things that are out there that may preempt what you're doing, and it's difficult to sort of contextualize your issue in the context of everything else. And so to the extent that you can link it to something, that's always good. But patience is a real big part of this, and if you have an executive mindset about your issue, let's do this now for all the right reasons, right? That this needs to move now. Not everybody is going to appreciate that because they just come from a different perspective, may not have been well informed on the issue, or actually may be against it and is just trying to be polite. So you have to sort of take a little step back and understand your landscape. And for a lot of you, that will start tomorrow, if it hasn't started already. For those who've been in this space for a long time, you know what that trek is like. So it's a matter of finding the balance, and that's very hard to do because the energy is to get it done now because of the urgency of the moment, particularly when we're confronting some of the real big challenges that our electoral system is facing, and the issues surrounding that really animates and motivates the interest to get it done now. But not everybody's moving at the same speed you are. And that's an important point to, I think, understand.
When I became a lobbyist, I looked at people who had lobbied me when I was chief of staff and looked at those who I liked, those who I didn't like, not on a personal level, but professional level. And a couple of the things is when you come in and you present your request, and then you just walk away and expect staff to do it all. That's not going to work. So I've always thought of myself as staff to the staff, or staff to the member of Congress. Even though I'm a lobbyist, I would provide them with all the information to be successful. For example, in a small space, an appropriation for a disabilities organization to have a job training program, being able to lay out exactly what it would look like, where it would fit into the appropriations, and how it would benefit their constituents. Right. So it's really important to lay out all of that and then do the follow-up work, fill out all the forms that are necessary, not so much in your issue, but in appropriations, giving them everything they need. Or there was a provision that I got into, two provisions into the defense appropriation bill, and language had to be written. So I wrote the language. It didn't go in exactly as I had written it, but I at least proposed, I gave them a starting point. It's much easier to edit than to take what I want and put that down into words for the staff to do that. So I always thought of myself as staff to the staff. And as Michael said, identifying what the problem is. A lot of people come in with a solution when you don't know what the problem is. So what are we trying to solve here? Right. So making sure that they understand this is the problem and here's how we propose to solve it. And being realistic about it, not being arrogant, not thinking it's the only solution in the world. So you might have to compromise. In the example of the wine and spirit wholesalers, which I mentioned earlier, it seems like a tiny compromise, but it made all the difference in the world. I think that's probably
so, and we have prepared you guys for that. Those are both very good points. In your yellow packet, which we'll discuss here in a few minutes, there's a letter that we want members of Congress to send to the American Bar Association. We've written a letter for them. That goes a ton towards actually getting it done. And the language to the For Freedom Amendment is in your packet as well. So it's not going to be a heavy lift work-wise for them to do this. It's going to be a heavy lift ideologically, because as I've said to whoever's listened to me at a given moment, Washington changes very slowly. And going to Michael's point about having patience, but once the idea takes hold, it's going to take off like this
very quickly. Yeah.
I mean, and you'll see from Trump supporters to progressives all gather around it, because they'll think supporting it is a good idea and it benefits them. And we go in there with 86% referendum in Maine. I mean, that's pretty outrageous. 86%. You know, Jeff gave us some numbers earlier today. 131 million. Was that the number? That's unbelievable. That support is unbelievable. But we just have to translate that into a member of Congress taking that support and realizing how important it is. So, great answers, both of you. I'm not going to ask that one.
Okay.
Well, no. What's the best pitch you've ever given?
That's a difficult one. I don't know. The best pitch? The best pitch is always around how it's going to benefit their constituents. I've lobbied for a provision to clean up a nuclear waste that was left during the Cold War. So just explaining why that's the government's problem to solve and how it benefits the constituents. Appropriations, I mentioned a disabilities organization that I work for and a job training program we're trying to get funding for, but laying out exactly how that's going to benefit their constituents. It may seem like, oh, that's obvious, it's job training, it's for constituents, but what does it mean? How do you get a person with a intellectual disability trained for a job and then into a job and keeping the job? So being able to explain all of that. And I mean, my pitches always involve community support too.
That's key.
Community, either letters from community leaders or I bring community leaders into meetings with me. So not
Michael,
specific.
before you answer, let me give you guys a little translation on appropriations. It's Washington talk. Our enemies, because I was an appropriations lobbyist too, call them, well, they don't even call them earmarks, which is what they are. What do they call them?
Congressionally directed spending.
Yes, yeah. So.
And community project funding. That's what they are.
They are. They're actually.
Congressionally directed spending. Really? Seriously?
It's money that would be spent by the federal agencies.
There's nothing more oxymoronic than anything that's congressionally directed.
It's a small part.
We watch, we see every day, people. You're not hiding anything from us.
So what are your thoughts, Michael?
So actually, as lieutenant governor, I had to lobby, and you know, I had to lobby for a bill that my office drafted and championed, introducing charter schools to the state of Maryland, and our first legislative session in 2003. I've been on the job for about 3 weeks, and sat down. We had obviously prepped the bill before we did the work, you know, staff to the staff kind of deal. But we did a lot of the preliminary work, and you know, I'm as Jim can tell you, I'm much more of a hands-on guy. So I just don't sit back and wait for people to, you know, pour stuff into my head. I got a whole lot of ish I want to say too, and I wanted to make sure that was part of the conversation. So we spent that time, but then you have to go convince a legislature that is dealing with the first Republican administration in Maryland since Spiro Agnew, and championing something out of George Bush administration's No Child Left Behind, in developing charter schools. That was not an easy sell, particularly in places like Prince George's County, our home backyard, and Baltimore, where there were just very, very tall obstacles to the idea of creating charter schools for, in this instance, black communities in need of a wider array of services in the public education space. And so what I had to do was to make the case. And I invited every member of the Black Caucus to my office, which was interesting, Jim, to hear a member of the Black Caucus coming into the office of the Lieutenant Governor say, "This is the first time I've been here."
Oh my God.
And I'm looking at this brother going, "You've been in the legislature for 20 years. What do you mean it's the first time you've been in the Lieutenant Governor's office?" So that tells you a little bit of the dynamic within the body politic itself. That's useful information for you to know that the member you're dealing with, that this is the first time that they've been approached on an issue, number one, but certainly been approached in a way that they have never been approached in the past. And so we went through that, and of course there was resistance. And as I had to point out to a few members who were showing that they were going to be hard asses about it and not even want to have the conversation, because I'm all about the conversation. Make your case that I'm wrong. I'm listening. But don't shut me down in the first instance without allowing me to at least make the case and get a conversation going. So those who did that, I would point out to them, I was like, "Fine, Senator, fine, Delegate, that's fine, but I'm just letting you know that next week when I show up at that school in your district that has no lights on and poor running water, to talk about your leadership with this school and this situation, you're welcome to join me at the press conference." Then they want to listen. The point there is, what's your leverage? What leverage do you bring to the conversation that inures to the benefit not of you, but of his constituents, right? Or her constituents. Because going back to what Marjorie said, that's really what your end game is. Mm-hmm. What you're asking for is something that's going to benefit not your organization or you personally or individually, but the broader community that you're hoping to have a positive impact on. And so those types of tools become very, very important when you're trying to assess how I'm going to approach this member, how I'm going to approach this member on this issue. And needless to say, we got charter schools passed in that first legislative session, and we still have them today, even though they try to weaken them from time to time. That's okay. That's another fight. You know, you win what you can win, right? And that's so it's understanding how that aspect of that dynamic works as well, because that plays into the patience game, it plays into all the other aspects of it. But it's kind of important to understand, where's the sweet spot with this member? If particularly if their voice is already inside of their district or within their constituency that have expressed some interest in your issue, you can now lay that on the table. We've been in conversation with folks in your community who are well aware of the value of this issue, and we were hoping you could help us help them.
And we've done, our state folks, and they're all in this room, have done a phenomenal job of meeting with local officials, getting them on board, and they will become lobbyists. They'll become your lobbyists, essentially, when we need them to call Congressman Fitzpatrick and say, "I'm in the state legislature. We're going to pass this legislation, and we need you on board."
Can I just put a pin in that? What Jim just said is incredibly important. The one thing you have to understand about Washington, D.C. is that this is not a proactive town. This is a reactive town. Mm-hmm. It reacts. Now I can say that because I grew up here, so I know what I speak. I grew up in Petworth, so I know this backyard very well. There's not a player that comes to this town, and when they do, I'm ready to go, we're going to do this, and we're going to pass this, and we're going to... Nah, you ain't doing any of that. And the reason you're not is that's not how the town moves. It just doesn't. And I think the American people kind of bake that in. The reality of it is the strength of any effort is at the state and local level. Mm-hmm. Yeah. You bubble that energy up and you get them to respond to it, to react to it. So what Jim just said is very important. When legislators in the district of that member call that member and say, we're down with this. Our people want this. In fact, I'm introducing the legislation, and this is something that we found in our work with the National Popular Vote, to move it through the state legislative process and to get little resistance, because a lot of times what happens is a member will see an issue and they want to squash it. They don't want it to grow, and so they start talking bad about it, right, talking smack about it, even though it's not a federal issue or anything that's going to bubble up to their plate. So it works two ways, where they may try to kill something that could fall into the state purview that they don't want to have happen because they've been lobbied by some others telling them to kill it. Or it's the reverse, where the people or the representatives are saying, we want this issue. And so to the extent that you can generate that kind of organic ground game energy, that goes a long way to sort of shaping the narrative at the federal level, because it's emanating out of the state level, and there's going to be action there. And everyone's going to pay attention to that action, and they're going to react to that action at some point.
Excellent, great answer. We're going to go to Q&A here in a minute, but I want to give you both the chance to blow your own horns. So tell me your most successful lobbying effort and how you got there, besides the three issues you've already said.
So probably one of my most successful was a very small provision in the Defense Appropriations Bill for commercial loan guarantees for commercial reusable in-space transportation, in short, a space tug. So the first thing that we had to do was find a champion for it. The company was based. My client, the company, was based in Utah, but the president was in New Mexico, and then there were some other Washington State ties and West Virginia ties, et cetera, et cetera. So we targeted Senator Domenici as our champion because he was senator from New Mexico. I knew him very well because I had been chief of staff to a New Mexico member of Congress. And you made me lose my track here. He was on the Appropriations Committee on Defense Appropriations. So had to lay out to him why this was a good idea, why this company, and there was no mention of the company in the legislation. It just gave the opportunity to this company or other companies similar to develop commercial reusable in-space transportation. We ended up, so this is where another element of success comes in. Sometimes luck is a big part of it, but there's always that old axiom of luck is at the crosshairs of hard work and persistence and all the rest of that. So all the hard work. So Domenici said yes, but he said that we had to have Senator Stevens on board. Senator Stevens was the chairman of the Defense Appropriations at that point in time. We had a general, retired U.S. Air Force general on our board, and so we decided to set up a couple of meetings with high-level defense appropriators, and including Senator Stevens. Well, I kept getting calls back from the scheduler saying the senator was not available to meet with the general, and we could meet with staff. Then I got a call from Senator Stevens' office, and I was getting ready to write no in my note. Actually, I think I did write no on my notes. And she said, well, he's only available at noon. Does that work for you? Sure. Well, he has lunch at noon. Are you okay with that? Sure. And he only eats lunch in the Senate cafeteria or the Senate dining room. Are you okay with that? Yeah. And that was just a stroke of luck. I kind of felt like Forrest Gump, at the right place at the right time. Anyways, we had that meeting. It was the general, a former member of Congress who was a colleague of mine, myself, the senator, and one of the Senator Key's staff members. And we talked business maybe 5 minutes and then just spent the rest of the time with pleasantries. And it worked. So he said yes to it. In the meantime, Boeing, I guess, was developing a space tug also, so they were lobbying against this. Obviously, Boeing has a much bigger force than me. So they were out on the Hill lobbying against it. And the president, before a bill is passed in Congress, the administration puts out a statement of administration policy, a SAP. So when the Defense Appropriations Bill came out, the only provision the president opposed was our provision. Thankfully, we had Senator Stevens and Senator Domenici on board, but not just those two. We had lobbied other members of the Senate Appropriations Committee, both on the defense appropriations, the chairman of the committee, and we were able to lobby them with their constituents, leaders in their community. So with Senator Domenici, it wasn't just the president of the company, it wasn't just me. Sandia National Labs was very interested in the propulsion aspect of the space tug. So on their list of priorities, Sandia National Laboratories listed this in their priorities book. In Utah, we got Senator Bennett on board, and Senator Hatch, and because that's where the company was based, we had Washington State, which was Senator Murray, who was also on the Appropriations Committee, and West Virginia University was, I don't even remember how it was involved, but it was involved. So we had all this community support and multiple members of Congress supporting it. And so it passed.
Great. Well, congratulations.
Like really kind of a weird thing.
She
but
took on Boeing and beat them.
more than once.
Michael, can you do a 2-minute answer for me?
I haven't had that kind of success, but no, I think probably for me the other issue, because I had such a diverse portfolio as Lieutenant Governor, so I ran from economic development, education, to criminal justice, a little bit of healthcare. And so for me, it was just kind of, in any given legislative period, just trying to figure out what the target was going to be for that year, and sort of work that as much as possible. The one thread, though, that went throughout, well, two threads that went throughout that were the education and economic development piece. And for me, the biggest part of this economic part was changing the state's small and minority business enterprise program. And when I say change it, I mean blow it up and create something new. And that was very interesting, because what I was trying to do and ultimately was successful at doing was leveling up the participation of minority and women-owned businesses in the state, particularly given Maryland's relationship with federal contractors and the federal government and all of that, but also recognizing that it's Maryland, like many states, but more so in many respects, is a very entrepreneurial state. So we wanted to create a lot of economic energy from everything, including creating arts districts in Hydesville and Riverdale and places like that, to generating international exchange, both academic and business, with Israel and China and Africa. And so it was reimagining the landscape of how small business owners would do business. That was part one. Part two was then, how do I connect the dot to education? So it was looking at reintegrating trade school programs into the business culture, which at that time, a lot of trade schools had gone away and had not been the focus. Everyone's going to college. Well, not every kid wants to go to college or should go to college, because they're good with the combination of their mind and their hands, and they're able to do things that no university will allow them to do. My son is a very good example of that, who came into the video gaming business before there was video gaming business. So as a young video gaming artist, there was no academic program for him at that time. Now NYU has an entire department. So when he went to NYU, he was like, I think I'm just going to join a band. And I went, not for $50,000 a year, you are. And I pulled his behind out. But it's understanding that space. So a lot of, to translate it to what you're doing, is recognizing that there are things that may seem unconnected to what you're doing, that you can connect and sort of lobby together and sort of make a dual case. There are other things that reinforce your central efforts. So the education piece reinforced the economic, and the economic reinforced the education, because I would say to business people, so when you look at that kindergartner, what do you see in the elementary school down the street from your business? And they're like, I see a kindergartner. I said, no, that's your workforce. Mm-hmm. So make the investment in her school. Buy that school computers. Integrate in, some tech programming. At a high school, offer summer opportunities for those high school kids, because during the course of those 4 years at that high school, at some point they're going to knock on your door and ask for a job. And the one thing a lot of business owners complain about is, well, no one knows how to do what we do, right? They're not being taught that. So that piece of it, I think, is a very important part, and it was a very successful sort of lobbying effort, if you will, with both the legislature, but more broadly to the teachers' unions, to parents, to small business owners, white contractors who were not happy at first because they didn't know where I was going with this, and they were like, I don't know what this means. I'm like, well, I'm just trying to give you more business, and so it's how you sort of create the space to calm everybody's fears, tell everybody to settle the hell down, and focus on how we all grow together.
Excellent, excellent. We've got time for a few questions. Sure.
So you guys were talking about the importance of being able to be specific about what the problem is. So I'm curious, how would you frame the problem, and what to you makes it important that it's addressed?
Well, I mean,
In terms of the 28th Amendment?
Well, yeah.
In terms of what?
In terms of foreign and dark money in our campaigns. So the first thing I would say is, do we really want that, first of all, that kind of money influence our campaigns from Russia, China, Saudi Arabia, Iran? Let's go through the laundry list of countries that are doing that. And you doing it through shell companies because it's illegal. Or do we really want George Soros, who's an enemy on the right, obviously, and there's plenty on the left as well. Mm-hmm. Do we really want George Soros determining who our elected officials are? And the answer obviously is no. So again, I think both of these guys said know our audience and know what's going to hit them and what's going to have an effect on them.
For me, this issue is an excellent question on a number of levels, because what very few people know was, as national chairman, RNC chairman, we had the companion bill to citizens, the companion case to the Citizens United case. So we had offered up through the courts a repeal of McCain-Feingold, because our argument was that state and national parties are best suited for large dollar donations, right? Do not create another space for people to park money and no one know about it. What folks don't appreciate about our national and political parties at every level is that we are required by federal election law and state election law, Virginia is a good example, to report every donation we receive. Name, address, occupation, telephone numbers, emails, etc. every 30 days. Virginia requires it pretty much every time you receive a check. That's why they have unlimited
Yeah.
campaign expenditures, spending there, because when you make a donation, that candidate or that party is filing it automatically the next day. It's recorded. So that process was an open process, which we thought what McCain-Feingold did was screw with that and basically create a situation where at some point you're going to have to deal with the excesses of that money, because the caps weren't capturing all the dollars that were sitting out there, that were parked out there. That was the essence of Citizens United, and the Supreme Court looked at Citizens United and looked at our case to repeal McCain-Feingold and decided to go with Citizens United. Citizens United. So they opened up that door. And my argument has always been from the very beginning, okay, fine, if you want to play that way, but damn it, expose every dollar that's deposited into any super PAC or any PAC at all. And to be honest, I don't even care if it's a C4, if it's a C20, if it's a See Your Mama PAC. If you write it a check, disclose the money, because it is the one way you can reestablish trust in the system when people know who's giving the money, where the money's going, where it's going to. Because if you don't want that exposed, guess what you ain't gonna do? You're not writing the check.
Right here in front. Rand.
Okay. Mr. Steele, you mentioned this just now, restore trust in the system. And it seems to me as an opener for like tomorrow's lobby days, one of the things that I would be inclined to say, and I want to throw it out as a test because I don't know, I need your opinion, is that the citizenry has become less confident in our American system of government, and we need to do things that increase trust. And that essentially is what this amendment proposal is about. Does that make sense?
I like it personally.
I love it. Yep,
I like
absolutely.
it because it's no shading. It's stating an obvious truth that every elected official in this country know to be true, and those who engage in a dishonest way in politics know that they have a hand in perpetuating. And so I think I like that opening because it really just kind of lays bare that we're losing confidence because there are obstacles that are deliberately being created that weakens our trust in this system and that seemingly work against the interests of the people. And one of the reasons I've always advocated for making Election Day a national holiday. Number one, moving it the hell out of November, right? We find the darkest, 3 o'clock in the afternoon it start getting dark. Y'all go vote, you know? Opening it up to a process where you allow, in which we have a little bit of now with, you know, voting early, vote by mail. Let's do more of that. You know, I was laughing during the 20 cycle listening to all my Republican friends trash vote by mail, voting early. I'm like, dude, how do you think we won all those elections in 2010? Right? But y'all go ahead and do you and lose, right? But what it also does is the way they do it creates a lie about the system and immediately sets up the instances of distrust. So I really appreciate your approach. Straight, direct, and honest.
The one other thing I would add about it is no matter which office you're in, that message works.
Yep.
And you will have to tailor your message in other parts of your message depending on who the office is. But
yeah, don't tell everybody they're the problem, but you know, even though we know they're the problem.
Or that George Soros is the problem. There's only certain offices who can use
exactly.
that in. But yeah, that is a great opener no matter what office you're in.
Absolutely it is.
And hard to argue with.
100%. Yes, sir.
So I suspect that we're going to meet with a bunch of, that's okay.
We're trying to tape it.
I suspect we're going to meet with a bunch of representatives and senators who are probably pretty already on board with this concept. A lot of them are going to be inclined to favor it. So if you're sitting there and a lobbyist comes in and pitches you in the first minute about something and you say, yeah, I'm on board, I'm with it, what can we say in the next few minutes without wasting their time to further the process, help us even more, other than to say, okay, you're with it, thank you, goodbye. I mean, we're going to have a few minutes. We want to make the most of it. We don't want to waste their time. What are the additional asks or the additional points we want to make once they say, yeah, that sounds great to me, and my guy likes it?
So, I'm sorry, go ahead, Marjorie.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the things I would say is, what can we do to help you help us pass this? Who among your colleagues do you think is this close to a yes, that we can go and influence them? And in general, how can I help you? How can we make sure that your constituents know that you're on board? And then just let them talk, and they will, right?
No, that's exactly right. In fact, that was the answer I was about to give. Is that
My answer was a little shorter. It was just 2 words.
Thank you.
No, prove it.
There you go.
Don't say that. Don't say that.
I know, but so my point was, what everything Marjorie just said is prove it.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So,
But don't say prove it, because they're so sensitive, and you can't
Sure
be
you are.
honest with them. Look, I have to tell you honestly, when I was in office, I appreciated the person who would come to me and just lay their you know what on the table.
Mm-hmm.
I appreciated that, because that's how I am. Unfortunately, not everybody is like that. There are more snowflakes out there in office than we need, in my view. But that's me. I'm sort of a radical, crazy guy in the corner going, guys, look at what we're doing here and how we're doing it. So if you want to improve the system, then show me you're ready to improve the system. But she gave you the absolute correct way to do it. My way will get you kicked out, or at least not invited back. So don't adhere to that, but just know in the back of your mind, when you're saying all those lovely things, you're thinking, prove it.
And just one other thing is, as a lobbyist, when I'm with a client and we're in the office and the member of Congress is like, yeah, that's great, we'll do that. And then in my head, you're right, I say prove it. And so saying yes and doing yes are two very different things.
Right.
So then we've got to help the member, the staff, do the yes.
How can I help you be a champion of this? And how can I make you look great in the process?
Yep,
Beautiful.
absolutely.
That's it.
And who else should we go to?
Right.
And there are other asks. Gotcha. There are other asks in the packet, and I'm going to take a couple minutes and talk about the yellow packet if I could. There's the letter to the ABA that I mentioned earlier. You can have them sign that and send it. And then, who else should we talk to? I think it was mentioned here. What other of your colleagues do you think would be on board with this? And could you talk to them too before we do? Mm-hmm. So, a couple things I want to talk about. Thank you guys both, by the way. This is incredible, and I think I learned a lot.
You learned how to lobby.
I think that you had someone a question over there.
Okay, one more.
Sorry, I know I'm out of your sight. So I have a different sort of question, but also thank you for your sage advice, of course. Say you are the community leader, and you're being brought in by a lobbyist, and say the conversation starts going off the rails in a direction that you don't agree with. Is it best to A, stay quiet and let the lobbyist and lobbied play it out and potentially run out of time to interject at the end, or be the physician interrupter you are and try to get it back on track for why you're there?
Well, hopefully you've prepped the office holder, the local community leader, beforehand, and you're not caught off guard by that. But if you are, what I've done in the past in the lobby, if I have that happen, I actually will refute the community leader's points, because it's going against what we want, and it makes us look confused and divided.
In
So-
a diplomatic way.
In a very diplomatic way, of course. I'm the ultimate diplomat. You guys don't know me well enough yet to know that that was completely an untrue statement.
Yeah, I knew that was not a true statement, but
But anyway, yeah, so I mean, yeah, and if you see it, you can start to make the moves to end the meeting and then do follow-up with staff and say, hey, we didn't really expect that to happen. You know, let me tell you why this is a good idea. But one thing about the yellow packets, one sexer, one thing I want to emphasize, and I really want to emphasize this, and it's been told to you till you're tired of hearing it, do not bring your political views into the office with you.
oh yeah, please don't.
That is key, because if you do, that automatically places you on one side or the other. So leave Trump, leave Biden at the door, and anybody else leave at the door.
Yeah, leave Republican, leave Democrat, leave conservative, leave liberal, leave all of it. Check your politics at the door, because you're actually, believe it or not, walking into a neutral space for you.
Right. And we want to
And
maintain that neutrality.
You want to maintain that neutrality.
I got time for one more quick one.
Jim, I got one right here.
Okay.
Thanks. Mr. Steele, I've been a fan of your honest appraisal of your party's extremism.
Thank you.
Everybody else in the party is defending this stuff, you know? So I wonder if you can identify the limits of their extremism. You know, how far do you think are they willing to go with this Marjorie Taylor Greene stuff?
Tread carefully.
Well, I'm going to answer that this way. We can have this conversation outside of this particular venue, because I respect the fact that maybe not everyone is of the particular mindset one way or the other. And I think it kind of goes to what we were just talking about, that understand your purpose for the moment you're in, and the purpose for the moment you're in is to advance a particular interest around creating trust in the system, in the electoral system again, and advocating for that idea. And the rest of it, you know, that's why you're doing what you're doing, is to create that lane for people to have that space to express their view one way or the other at the ballot box, which I encourage all to do in November, however you choose to do it. But between now and then, you know what your charge is in front of you, and that is very much going to this fine lady's point about reestablishing trust, number one, and making the case for why this change is important for the country, regardless of what position you hold on a political figure, a political party, or a political idea. Now, if y'all want to get dirty and nasty on stuff, we can have that conversation at the bar. I'm happy to do that. But I want to reserve this space for the work in front of you, not anything else.
And so on that note,
Thank you very much.
thank you. On that note, we'll wrap it up. Make sure you catch Michael. What are you on, Sundays?
Saturday and Sundays, 8 to 10 a.m. The weekend
On
with
MSNBC.
Alicia and Simone. So we have fun.
Please join me in giving a big round of applause. This was really helpful.
Thank you guys very much. Good luck tomorrow.
Yep.
Knock it out.
And Brian, 1 second, boom, we're done.
There you go.